in John chapter 16, verses 16 through 22. Jesus went on to say, "In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me." At this, some of the disciples said to one another, "What does he mean by saying, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? And because I am going to the Father," they kept asking, "what does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he is saying." Jesus saw they wanted to ask him about this, so he said to them, "Are you asking one another what I meant then when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? Very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn to joy. A woman giving birth to a child has pain before her time has come. But when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. So with you, now is your time of grief. But I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will take away your joy." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. A few years back, Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinertz released a film at the South by Southwest Film Festival that immediately started to garner attention. A month later, Everything Everywhere All at Once would release worldwide and gross $143 million on a $25 million production budget, becoming the production company A24's highest-grossing film ever, and going on to win 7 out of the 11 Oscars that it was nominated for by the Academy the following year. Everything Everywhere All at Once tells the story of a weary, middle-aged woman named Evelyn Wong who is running a struggling laundromat alongside her husband Wayman and attempting to parent her ever-distancing teenage daughter, Joy. And the resistance that Evelyn is facing forces her to contend with the rather ordinary, unimpressive, uninspiring life that she has lived until now. Is this really all that there is? That's the prevailing question in the film. Suddenly, Evelyn is pulled into a multiverse, this parallel existence with an infinite number of ultimate worlds containing every possible version of herself. And so in one world, she's a kung fu master. In another, she's a famous actress. And still in another, a maid, a sign spinner, and a singer. The movie is an absurdist comedy. It's surreal, it's disorienting, and it's quite overwhelming. Fair warning for those of you who watch and get motion sickness or need space to process things. Just saying. But beneath the layer of absurdity is a profound, depressing reality. You see, the movie is an attempt to make you laugh so that you don't stop long enough to cry. But if you do slow down, if you do watch intently, if you look past all of the hyperactivity and all of the flashing lights and the wild humor, you begin to see a story about a world collapsing under the weight of its own meaninglessness. You see a mother and a daughter both drowning in different versions of despair, one numbed out by routine, the other swallowed by nihilism, this belief that life is pointless, that nothing matters. You see people trying to hold their lives together with distraction, busyness, achievement, noise, anything that will numb and help them to avoid facing the quiet fear living just beneath the surface of their hearts. And that's what makes the film so hauntingly brilliant. Because Everything Everywhere All at Once isn't just Evelyn Wong's story, it's our story. The behavioral scientist Thomas T. Hills analyzed over 1 million English language books that were published between the years 1850 and 2019. And one of his biggest conclusions was the erosion of language associated with morality and virtue, and the drastic rise in language related to anxiety and fear. Surveying the cultural landscape, it's quite clear to see why. Political partisanship has been supercharged by algorithmic echo chambers, raising societal fragmentation and polarization to historic levels. Growing tribalism, the introduction of deepfake technology, and the ever-increasing amount of digital and AI slop, as it's commonly referred to, is creating a culture without a grounded center of truth. And that loss of shared truth and a common vision of public good is driving a collapse in communal trust that is undermining all of the institutions that have historically held our society together. And then there's the constant inundation of news and global events that we can't ever seem to keep up with. It paralyzes us with fear and overwhelms us with fatigue, keeping us stuck on the hamster wheel of our own making. We scroll, we search, we strive, and we self-optimize, all while quietly avoiding rather than courageously contending with our rather ordinary, unimpressive, uninspiring lives that we've lived until now. Is this really all that there is? It seems that's also the prevailing question for many of us here today. Everything, everywhere, all at once. It's funny until it isn't. It's absurd until it feels familiar. And so the question we have to ask as we find ourselves living in times of anxiety and fear, the question that we have to ask is this: is there hope? Is there hope? And if so, then from where or from whom does our hope come from? You see, for the last 50 years or so, the prevailing answer has been that hope can be found in you, in me. That we are our own hope, that the plunders and pleasures of a kingdom could be pursued and enjoyed without the presence of a king to oversee and distribute said pleasures equitably. And so rather than subscribing and surrendering to God, we decided we could be our own gods. The late great theologian Timothy Keller summarized it this way, quote, "It is not merely that we no longer need God. Humanity now is God. We are our own hope for the future. We can have not just hope, but confidence in a bright future because we have all the resources within ourselves to bring it about." But what happens when those resources fail to bring about what they promise to? What happens when a promise for a better future is still met by present realities of war, violence, destruction, corruption, poverty, uncertainty, injustice, and fear? Well, it leads to where we find ourselves presently, in a crisis of hope. Because when you detach the moral vision of hope, the kingdom, from its moral source, the king, an inevitable slide into anxiety and disorientation is bound to ensue. Researchers like Jean Twenge and Jonathan Haidt have well documented the dramatic rise of these issues among younger generations, correlating with digital saturation and social isolation. Haidt even went so far as to dub our generation the anxious generation. And he noted how constant digital stimulation is undermining the ability to cultivate deep attention, authentic community, and sustained hope. So yes, I think it's fair to say that we are in a crisis of hope. And if you've ever studied crisis before, then you know that at a bare minimum, crisis disorients. In more severe cases, crisis and trauma can diminish or even destroy a person's sense of reality. This is why first responders narrate very plainly what's going on in a traumatic situation. "I'm John, I have medical training, I'm here to help you. Your name is Christy, you fell while backpacking, your leg may be injured." My friends, this is the need of our moment. It seems we, as followers of Jesus in the digital age, are not journeying through this life unscathed. The pain, disorientation, and overwhelming nature of evil, suffering, and sin is suffocating us all. It's everything, everywhere, all at once. And in hard times, we need to be told very plainly what's going on. We need to have reality narrated for us in simple language. And that is what Easter does. It speaks hope in hard times. But I recognize how Easter can feel for many of us. You may be walking into church for the very first time or the first time in a long time today, and you're nervous, hoping that you'll just be told whatever you vaguely remember from the mouth of a cranky grandparent or a sweaty preacher that you heard when you were a kid, so that you can be on your merry way to the overpriced brunch waiting for you after this. Others of you are coming in wounded. And you're on edge, just waiting for the other shoe to drop, for that one thing to be said that will confirm all of your biases and assumptions, authorizing you to put the church back in its place and condemn all that it's done wrong. And here I am, the sweaty preacher who's going to attempt to share a 2,000-plus-year-old pre-made script in a way that keeps your attention long enough to care. See, whether you're here and Easter is just another B-list holiday defined solely by Easter bunnies and egg hunts, or you're here in celebration of the greatest day in history, a day in which we joyfully remember the resurrection of Jesus Christ, of which to you I say, He is risen. He is risen indeed. Regardless of where you're at on that continuum today, you are so welcome here. And my invitation to you is to, as best you can, let your guard down. I'm not here to sell or pitch anything. You're not going to leave with a brochure that contractually obligates you to subscribe to something that you don't even understand. Instead, today, I just want to share a story. And within this story is an announcement, a proclamation which contains good news for all people. You see, this story is the story of all stories. But it's also a story that intersects with your story and my story. It's a beautiful story, but it's not a safe story. It's a story that changes everything about life as we know it. It's a story that cuts through the malaise of the cultural script that we have been incessantly fed, that the universe has a plan for us, that we are in control of our destiny, or that our purpose is futile and that our existence is meaningless. You see, this story is the story that changes all of that. This story offers an invitation to not just keep on blindly and passively scrolling past the chaos. No, this story instead offers an invitation to step into the fray, to overthrow the powers of this dark world and the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realm, to seek justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God, to restore the human heart and to establish the kingdom of heaven here on earth. Easter gives us that hope. And so I want to share plainly how Jesus gives that hope to the one of four camps that all of us find ourselves in here today. The resurrection of Jesus gives hope to those of us who are waiting, wondering, and willing. So let's take them one at a time. First, to those who find themselves waiting. The pain of waiting can actually be seen in another resurrection story in the Bible that takes place a short time before Jesus of Nazareth's own resurrection. This is John chapter 11, beginning in verse 1. It says, "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, 'Lord, the one you love is sick.' So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, 'Let us go back to Judea.'" Now, on the surface, a verse like this feels off, cruel even. Like, why would Jesus, after learning that the one whom he loves is sick, why would he stay 2 more days before going back to Bethany? This is the painful aspect of waiting. I can't tell you exactly why Jesus waited. I mean, sure, I have theories, and a plain reading of the text would say, verse 15, "so that you may believe." But to say, yeah, this is why Jesus waited 2 days and did exactly what he did as he did it, I don't know. But what I do know is that in the waiting, there is an invitation to trust in the one that we are waiting on. And that's exactly how we see the sisters of Lazarus, Mary and Martha, respond. Skip down to verse 17. "Upon his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days." Now, this is fascinating. Jesus' arrival onto the scene after Lazarus has been dead for 4 days is very intentional. You see, the prevailing belief amongst first century Jews was that a soul stayed near a body for 3 days. If there was any hope of resurrection, it would happen within a 3-day window. That means that after 4 days, all hope would be lost. Verse 17 again, "Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. 'Lord,' Martha said to Jesus, 'if you had been here, my brother would not have died.'" Do you see it? This is the honest prayer of a woman who finds herself waiting. A few verses later, Martha's sister Mary would echo the very same cry, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Now, this is interesting because Jesus responds to Martha by teaching her truth. He says, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." And then look at this, verse 28. After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here, and he's asking for you." So now Mary comes before Jesus, laments, and how does Jesus respond to her? Verse 33, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. Where have you laid him? He asked. Come and see, Lord, they replied, and Jesus wept. How interesting that the teacher meets Martha with truth, but meets Mary with tears. This, I believe, is the profound beauty of waiting with Christ. As we wait for resurrection, God doesn't just remind us of the bigger story at play. He steps personally into our own individual stories. He meets us in the pain. He meets us in the dark. He meets us in the loss. Even though Jesus knew that the miracle was coming, we still witness a God who sits with us in our suffering, feeling what we feel. He doesn't rush to a resolution. He waits with us in the ache. And so to those of you who are here waiting today, God may be attempting to intersect you with truth or tears, but either way, he sees you. He hears you, and he's near to you. Today, of all days, is the day that we remember why this is true. But more to come on that in a moment. Next, to those who find themselves wondering. You might be surprised to know that you find yourself in good company today if that's you. Easter is a story full of wondering. Here's Luke chapter 24, beginning in verse 1. On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here, he has risen. Remember how he told you while he was still with you in Galilee? The Son of Man must be delivered over to the hands of sinners, be crucified, and on the 3rd day be raised again." Then they remembered his words. When they came back from the tomb, they told all of these things to the 11 and to all the others. It was Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the others with them who told this to the apostles. But they did not believe the women because their words seemed to them like nonsense. Peter, however, got up and ran to the tomb. Bending over, he saw the strips of linen lying by themselves, and he went away wondering to himself what had happened. Do you see it? Both the women and Peter find themselves wondering what had happened. This word, wondering, in the original Greek literally means to be perplexed, to be entirely at a loss for words, or to doubt. And this is the part that we often try to skip over in the Easter story, isn't it? I mean, we treat the darkness of the crucifixion on Friday and the painful waiting on Saturday, and then the dawn of new light on Sunday as if it's this black and white divide where all of the pain, all of the hurt, all of the disappointment, all of the fear just poof, suddenly disappears. But that's not the narrative that we read at all. Instead, we read about a group of women grieving and so heartbroken that very early in the morning, meaning as soon as possible, they're going to the tomb to prepare a dead corpse for burial. There was no hope, no expectation, and no premonition that the tomb that they were going to was going to be empty upon entering it. And so they enter the tomb, they can't find the body, and they begin to wonder. They're perplexed, they're at a loss for words. Peter runs to the tomb, sees the empty tomb that Jesus promised and foretold, and leaves, not full of faith, but full of doubt. He went away wondering to himself what had happened. And that reads a whole lot less like a fairy tale and a whole lot more like real life, doesn't it? You find yourself here far less hopeful and far more doubtful. Your heart aches for the ways that life has beaten you down and taken you out. The pain of this life has left you perplexed and stunned. And so your posture coming in today isn't so much delighted, but defensive. You're on edge, ready to combat anything that might make yet another false promise that is just going to leave you unfulfilled and leave you picking up the shattered pieces. Right? My friends, if you find yourself here today wondering about all of this, if life feels a little bit like everything, everywhere, all at once, and you feel overwhelmed, resigned, exhausted, or ready to give up, boy, do I have good news for you. Let's go back to John chapter 11. Jesus receives word that his friend Lazarus is sick. And Jesus, after waiting 2 days, tells his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." And how do his disciples respond? "But Rabbi, a short while ago, the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" Translation, "This is not a good idea, Jesus. We don't want you to do that." But Jesus was indignant. "My friend Lazarus is dead. I'm going back to comfort his sisters and fulfill my kingdom agenda. All aboard?" Crickets. Except Thomas. Thomas, who's more infamously known as Doubting Thomas. We read this: "Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, 'Let us also go, that we may die with him.'" That's interesting, isn't it? Why would a disciple full of so much faith be most well known for his doubt? Well, later on, when Jesus was brutally murdered and buried, all of Thomas's dreams were dashed. He had believed so fiercely, and he'd been let down so embarrassingly. Thomas's response to the other disciples was him doing what we're all naturally inclined to do, to not make the same mistake twice. So Jesus rises from the dead, and he appears physically before his disciples, all of them but one, Thomas. When Thomas returns, the disciples enthusiastically share, "We have seen the Lord." But Thomas, dejected and deflated, comes back with this snarky reply: "Well, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand in his side, I will not believe." We cannot overlook this, my friends. Jesus' death was traumatic for his disciples. They had mortgaged everything on him being who he said he was, and he was gone. Just like that. Devotion had turned into disillusionment. Life as they knew it had been forever upended. And maybe that's your story. Perhaps you can recall the day that your life changed forever. You remember the sights, the sounds, and the scene of your biggest failure, your deepest source of shame, your greatest nightmare. And you find yourself disappointed and disenchanted with a God who said he would save you, but has seemingly abandoned you. I think Thomas understood what that's like. For 8 days, he lived in total darkness. A new reality had set in, a reality full of hurt, embarrassment, frustration, and resentment. "This is not the life I signed up for," I imagine Thomas thinking. And then this is John chapter 20. A week later, Jesus' disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Now, the question we might be wondering is, why did Jesus wait? Right? Because that's the question we're all wondering in our own stories. Why hasn't Jesus shown up? Why hasn't Jesus healed me? Why hasn't Jesus initiated justice for the wrong that was done to me? The trauma of our past often keeps us in a pit of despair that slowly dismisses the possibility of healing ever taking place. But in time, the wounded healer reveals himself, scars intact. That moment when the pain of the world, the pain Jesus endured, and the pain of your own past all coalesce, that moment of desperation where Jesus can most clearly reveal himself to you, that's the moment that Jesus waits for. There's this painting by Caravaggio called The Incredulity of St. Thomas that beautifully depicts this. Here we have Jesus gently guiding Thomas's finger into his wound. And we have Thomas with an expression of such surprise and such intensity that it forces us to fix our gaze on Thomas and ponder the thoughts going through his brain. My friends, this is the moment of epiphany. This is the moment when it clicks for Thomas. Wait, Jesus really is who he says he is. In this moment, this truth moves from the theoretical to the actual. Jesus encounters Thomas in the most personal and intimate of ways. He meets Thomas's wounds with his own. And it is this encounter that changes everything for Thomas. Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." You see, Thomas's life had been upended by the disappointment of the Savior's death and disappearance. But Thomas's life is even more upended by an encounter, not with an empty tomb, but with the risen Lord. And so to those of you who find yourself wondering this morning, I hope and pray that you know that the risen Lord waits ready to encounter you today as well. Next, to those who find themselves wandering. Maybe you've moved past the point of wondering and you've actually started to walk away. You're here today, but a summary of the last year of your life would reveal that your life has been far more of a wasteland than a wonderland. And if that's you, know that good company awaits you on Easter morning too. The morning of Jesus' resurrection, we find two disciples who are traveling from Jerusalem to Emmaus. Only one of these two disciples are named in the scriptures, and I think that might be intentional. I think many of us can resonate with these two disciples who on Easter Sunday find themselves wandering away from where their rabbi Jesus was. And so perhaps the unnamed disciple is you, and the unnamed disciple is me. Now, just to be clear, Jerusalem was where the resurrection had taken place. Jerusalem is where the empty tomb was found that morning, and Jerusalem is where the rumors of new life are starting to spread. And these two disciples are walking in the opposite direction. They saw the cross, and that was enough for them, not so much to rebel, but to retreat. And so they walk away. But then Jesus appears. This is Luke chapter 24, beginning in verse 15. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" I love this. Two disciples walking away from the place of resurrection, and Jesus does not confront them or scold them or yell at them to turn back. He joins them on the road out. And then Jesus does what he always does. He gets curious. "What are you discussing?" Verse 17, they stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened here in these days?" "What things?" he asked. You gotta love cheeky Jesus, right? "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people." But the chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. We had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all of this took place. I mean, can you sense the pain and disappointment? We had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. Think of all of the moments where your dreams have been dashed and your hope has been crushed. Think of all of the disappointments, the letdowns, and the failures. Jesus meets us there. As we wander away from resurrection, Jesus doesn't just remind us of the bigger story at play. Again, he steps personally into our own story. He meets us in our doubt, our disappointments, and our disorientation. He sees us when all we had placed our hope in seems to not pay off. He meets us here, not with contempt, but with curiosity. What are you doing out here on this road? What are you discussing? You see, God is patient with our processing. He's always extending invitations, ever willing to meet us where we are. And so to the wandering, know that Jesus does not just want you to ignorantly or coercively believe in him. He welcomes joining you on your journey of faith to believe in him. When Tim Keller, who I quoted earlier, came to faith, he was captivated by the fact that the gospel was both intellectually credible and existentially satisfying. You see, this gospel challenges us both rationally and personally. Listen, people in antiquity weren't stupid. No one was walking around 2,000 years ago going, "You know what? I bet I'll see someone rise from the dead today." No one was looking at some backwoods carpenter who was crucified for claiming to be God and going, "Yeah, but just you wait, he's the one." No, everyone had scattered, everyone had fled, everyone was keeping their distance, and yet this peasant proved to be just that. He proved to be the Son of God. He did rise from the dead. He is Lord and King and ruler over all the universe. But you will only be able to accept this if you allow him to not only confront your reason, but consume the commitments of your heart. The Swiss theologian Emil Brunner put it this way, quote, "The resurrection does not consist solely of what happened in the past, nor of what we happen to believe about it. Those are not the essential things. We do not gain much just by accepting that Christ died and rose again. People may say they believe this and still be on their way to hell. This belief is of no help unless you and I experience Jesus as Lord. The death of Jesus is for us nothing if we have not died with him. The resurrection of our Lord is for us nothing if we have not been raised with him. In other words, my friends, there is a deeper invitation still waiting for all of us here today. And so finally, to those who find themselves willing, for those who are willing to see this story as the story that anchors us in reality, what are we to do? Well, for that answer, we turn to Jesus. Here's our teaching text that we read earlier. In John chapter 16, Jesus tells his disciples, "In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me." At this, some of his disciples said to one another, "What does he mean by saying, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? And because I'm going to the Father." They kept asking, "What does he mean by a little while? We don't understand what he is saying." Jesus saw that they wanted to ask him about this, so he said to them, "Are you asking one another what I meant when I said, 'In a little while you will see me no more, and then after a little while you will see me'? Very truly I tell you, you will weep and mourn while the world rejoices. You will grieve, but your grief will turn into joy. A woman giving birth to a child has pain because her time has come, but when her baby is born, she forgets the anguish because of her joy that a child is born into the world. So with you. Now is your time for grief, but I will see you again, and you will rejoice, and no one will be able to take away your joy." Jesus is inviting his disciples. He's inviting us to hope. He's inviting us to believe in him, to trust that what he says will happen, will happen. And he says, when what I say will happen happens, our grief will turn into joy. This is the hope we have, my friends. In Greek, this word hope literally means profound certainty. Did you catch that? Our perplexity, our hesitancy, our doubt is transformed into certainty. How? That's what the disciples are wondering. What does he mean? We don't understand. And Jesus simply says, trust me. Your grief will turn into joy. I will see you again. My friends, this is the hope that Easter offers us. Our waiting, our wondering, and our wondering is never wasted. What feels like an ending is actually a beginning. Darkness gives way to light. Death gives way to life. N.T. Wright says it like this: Easter was when hope in person surprised the whole world by coming forward from the future into the present. We have this hope. The writer of Hebrews tells us that we have this hope as an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Hope is meant to hold us steady when the waters of life try to knock us around. Just like a strong anchor will hold a boat steady and keep it from drifting, our hope in Jesus acts as this anchor for our souls that keeps us from drifting in this life. Easter is a story of true hope. In fact, the Easter story is the greatest manifestation of hope in all of history. Because of the resurrection of Jesus, we can wait with hope. Look at Martha's response again. Martha said to Jesus, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Disappointment followed by devotion. I mean, this is a remarkable demonstration of faith. Despite the pain of the loss, Martha chooses to place her faith and her hope in the one who she believes can do what no one else can. I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world. This is the tension in the waiting, trusting Jesus even when his timing feels off. But waiting hopefully doesn't mean waiting numb. We are not asked to not feel the pain, the brokenness, or the cruelty of this world. We are asked to believe that whatever pain we're feeling now will not be forever. It means believing, like Martha, that even now God can and will come through. Or as Pastor John Tyson says, Easter is the belief that the worst thing is never the last thing. The resurrection of Jesus means that we can wonder with hope. Wondering describes the mental or emotional process of questioning, puzzling, or seeking understanding. It's active, it's uncertain, and it's ongoing. Wonder, on the other hand, is a response not to a mystery that can be solved, but to a miracle that is to be revered. We stand in awe of this Jesus who not only defeated death, sin, and the grave forever, but who meets us in the pain of our lives, who walks beside us in our confusion, and who reveals himself to us in the most marvelous of ways. This is the power that Jesus possesses. He's able to take all of the pain, all of the hurt, all of the trauma, wherever it may be on the sliding scale of life, and not just defeat it, not just resurrect it, but repurpose it. You see, according to Jesus, the wounds of this life do not disappear, they transform. Your pain and disillusionment are redeemed not through avoidance or expiration, but through encounter, through an alternative story that is entrusted to a loving, wise Savior in the context of relationship. We serve a God who meets our wondering not with condemnation, but with an invitation. Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Let your doubt be transformed into profound certainty, into hope today. And finally, because of the resurrection of Jesus, we can wonder with hope. When the two disciples and Jesus arrived at Emmaus, they, verse 30, took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and he began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? I love this. The disciples who, verse 16, were kept from recognizing Jesus now have their eyes opened. This is the same phrase used in Genesis chapter 3 when Adam and Eve's eyes were opened after eating the forbidden fruit. Only this time, instead of open eyes bringing shame and exile, now open eyes are bringing about restoration and renewal. They recognize the resurrected Jesus, and then he disappears. Not because he's lost, but because he's been found. The disciples' eyes are open. They can see. Jesus is modeling what we are all living, that we, as Paul says, walk by faith and not by sight. But it gets better. After Jesus disappears, notice how they respond. Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us? This moment of recognition was preceded by many moments of revelation. Jesus opened up the scriptures, and beginning with Moses and all of the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all of the scriptures concerning himself. I think this has such profound implications for those of us who find ourselves wandering today, that it's over conversation in community through curiosity that Jesus reveals himself. You see, we are the disciples on the road to Emmaus. You may have found yourself walking away from the very place where you belong. You may have found yourself forgetting that the resurrection has already happened, and yet Jesus will find you on that road. He is the shepherd who leaves the 99 and goes looking for the one for you. You've been convinced that to be a follower of Jesus means having all of the answers nailed down, that faith is about certainty and control, that there is no room for doubt. But as the Catholic theologian Ron Rolheiser so beautifully says, the opposite of faith is not doubt, it's despair. These disciples were wandering in confusion, their expectations shattered, their dreams lost. And yet Jesus shows up and he leverages curiosity to evoke clarity. He opens up the scriptures and he reveals himself, and that same invitation is available to you and I today. To follow Jesus doesn't mean that we'll never wander or stray. To follow Jesus means that we live always with the hope of being found. And when we are found, our wandering actually becomes our witness. Jesus reveals himself to his disciples, and then check this out, verse 33, they got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. You see, when we encounter the resurrected Jesus, those of us who walked away doubting the resurrection now run back to hopefully proclaim it. He is risen. He is risen indeed. Our wandering becomes a place of encounter which leads to a renewed sense of purpose. The very road that once carried us away from hope becomes the very path that carries us back with it. Family, those who dare to hope, those who are willing to hope, they live not with ignorant naivete, but with a defiant imagination. The brilliant storyteller J.R.R. Tolkien probably captured this best in what he called a eucatastrophe. A eucatastrophe is an event in a story where everything seems to be lost, but then suddenly breakthrough comes. It is a redemptive reversal. It's the moment in Everything Everywhere All at Once when Evelyn, who has spent her whole life chasing control and significance, suddenly realizes that the only way to fight back against the absurdity of her existence isn't through more power and control, but through surrender. In the middle of the chaos, Evelyn begins fighting evil with faith, with hope, and with love. She chooses these things not because the world is all of a sudden fixed or tidy or put together, but actually because it isn't. Evelyn's daring choice to hope in the midst of what seems like a hopeless situation is actually what unlocks all of the freedom, the reconciliation, and the restoration she was searching for all along. My friends, Easter is that choice. It's God choosing to send his Son to this earth, to live the life we couldn't, to die the death we should have, and to offer us a new life, a fresh start, and another chance that we don't deserve. God entered the chaos of this world, and he planted a promise. Your grief will turn into joy. I will see you again. Or as Tolkien so beautifully, poetically put it, quote, one day, everything sad will become untrue. The writer of Hebrews says it this way, since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in their humanity so that by his death, he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is, the devil, and free those who all their lives were held in slavery by their fear of death. Y'all, are you hearing this? We are going to live forever because Christ Jesus has been raised. We are going to rule and reign as kings and queens in a new heaven and a new earth. We are going to see Jesus Christ face to face, and all of our suffering will melt away in joy. You are not random particles merged by chance, living in a chaotic existence of everything, everywhere, all at once. No, you are in an intentional story where you are wanted, chosen, redeemed, gifted with a glorious destiny before you. We have this hope. Not just that Christ Jesus was raised from the dead, but that, as Paul says, the same Spirit who raised Christ Jesus from the dead now lives in you, now lives in me, now lives in us. Not a spirit of fear. Not a spirit of rejection, not a spirit of anxiety or apathy or despair, but the spirit of resurrection life. Those who wait, those who wander, and those who wonder are all extended another invitation today and every day. Are you willing to choose hope? To live as hope-filled people in a hopeless world, to believe that the story isn't over even when it feels like it is. This is the invitation of Easter, my friends, to choose to hope, not because life is easy, but because Christ is alive, to live as resurrection people, to dare to believe, church family. He is risen. He is risen indeed. Would you stand as we respond?